Welcome into Mile High Hockey. I'm excited to be back. I want to thank Mike Evans for filling in the last three shows. And Mike, the Avalanche last night play the New Jersey Devils as this 6-game homestand gets kicked off. And I think it's critical. I think we all know you got to come out of this homestand with 10, 11, 12 points. It's time. It's go time. And the Avs look good in a 5-1 win. Nathan MacKinnon is special, and Valeri Nichushkin returns.
Well, it's critical not only because of the points and because you don't want to find yourself really scrambling at any point. But I think it's just critical just because of how this homestand coincides with the trade deadline. You got the 6-game homestand, and after you play 4 games of this homestand is when the trade deadline is here. So you have to really cement what your plans are. Maybe they've already kind of, settled on a direction they want to go. But certainly last night's performance might give you some pause as to how aggressive do we want to be with the trade deadline, because that was impressive. And you can't help but look at the return of Valeri Nichushkin. At this point, well, it's not even a coincidence now. It's a proven fact that when this guy is in the lineup, they're just a completely different team. And what it brings to balancing out the top 2 lines, what it means for a guy like Casey Middlestad, who's been on a milk carton for the last month, you get Nichushkin back, and all of a sudden he looks a little different. So it's a real encouraging performance, but I also just kind of wonder what the reaction was in the front office to that performance. Was it one of those performances where they're like, hey, whatever we've been talking about, maybe we put this on pause for another couple games just to see what transpires?
Well, I'm glad you brought up Nichushkin because, Mike, he got hurt on New Year's Eve, and we were told it was day-to-day at that point. He finally returns on February 26th. And I think with Val, there's this hesitancy of, once Val goes away, he doesn't really come back unless, he's unfortunately in one of the programs. And he did phase 1 in Seattle. He did phase 2 last year. He did phase 3 with the 6-month suspension. I was sort of the camp of I'll believe it when I see it. And when Jared Bednar confirmed after morning skate yesterday, hey, Valeri Nichushkin's back in, and then he's out there, you're right. The energy level just goes up so much. The team has such a better spark to it. And you've outlined the numbers before, and you are the king of knowing these numbers. But they really are like a 500 team without Valeri Nichushkin, and they win 80% of their games with him. Again, I think fans are going to think it's crazy. He's not their best player. No one's saying he's their best player. But I can honestly say with a straight face, he may be their most important player.
You can't win a cup without him.
Yeah.
And when he went through what he went through last year, and there was some serious debates out there among Avalanche fans about what to do with this guy. And there was some who were fed up with him, who were just get rid of him. And my argument's always been, no, you roll the dice with this guy. And you are rolling the dice. But he's too good. I believe he's a top 20 player. I do. I believe he's a top 20 player in the NHL. And what he does, not only his individual talents, but also most importantly, what he brings to that second line, and also the options he gives you if you're really struggling to be able to put him up on the first line. He's such a good player that no matter what questions and concerns and hold your breath feelings you may have about him, to me, you just got to accept all that. And you wish it in a perfect world it wasn't like that, but this is the world we live in. And to me, if it's a world that you hope would include another Stanley Cup championship, you got to ride with Val.
Yeah, and it's a world in which every morning skate of every playoff game, it's going to be is 13 out there?
Yeah.
We've gotten burned against the Kraken, burned against the Stars, but there's no doubt he's an incredible hockey player. All right, we got to talk about Nathan MacKinnon because he was special last night. 2 goals, obviously winning MVP of the Four Nations face-off and just kind of keeping that rolling. Nashville and St. Louis aside, those were not the Avalanche's best games, but Mike, Nathan's on a different level right now. And his second goal last night, the hand-eye coordination to bat that puck into the net, I'm not saying he's Nikola Jokic because I think Nikola Jokic is in the conversations of all-time greats in the NBA. But I think like Nikola Jokic, we have to appreciate that we get to watch MacKinnon every night in an Avs sweater.
And I think what you saw in this most recent game is, so on the power play, for years, it was him and Mikko Rantanen.
Yep.
And MacKinnon would always kind of set up on that half wall, and he would operate from there. Well, Martin Necas comes along, and he's a different kind of player on the power play than Rantanen is.
Yep.
And so that changes the way that MacKinnon plays. And as MacKinnon said after the game, now I'm not necessarily as much of a puck hog, and now I'm allowed to kind of freelance a little bit more. I'm allowed to, go to the net, put myself in position to score maybe a different kind of goal than we're used to seeing from MacKinnon on the power play. But that speaks to his brilliance, that you've got two different players stylistically in Rantanen and in Netchus, and it changes the way he plays on the power play, but his brilliance doesn't change.
Right.
The style may change, the results, the brilliance doesn't. And so this is yet another example. Like we talk about Nikola Jokic, how Jokic is in the process of having maybe a career year. And wow, it's amazing that this deep into his career, he still finds ways to impress all of us and expand his game. Well, we're seeing the reigning Hart Trophy winner in many cases do the same thing. And as much as I get annoyed with the idea that there's some sort of Jokic voter MVP fatigue out there, I bristle at the same idea. Why aren't we talking more about MacKinnon as back-to-back Hart Trophy winner? Because whether it's what we've seen, his brilliance here with the Avalanche, or what we just saw with the Four Nations face-off, look, this dude is the dude.
He's special.
And I know he tries to be self-deprecating. He was repeatedly talking about Connor McDavid as being the best player in the world. Sorry, Nate. Sorry, Nathan MacKinnon. I couldn't disagree with you more. I got one hockey game to win. I want you instead of Connor McDavid.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and you're right. I think he tries to deflect, but he won the MVP. McDavid may have scored the OT winner for Canada, but MacKinnon certainly was the best player in that tournament. All right, you mentioned something off the top that I have to circle back to as we close out here. The trade deadline, and it looms, and it's March 7th, and guys like Zach By telling me, I will kill Chris McFarland if this is it. I will, but then Nietzsche comes in, and he's got the 3 assists last night, more than a point per game. He's playing well. I'm not saying you were Zach By. You and I were much more aligned, but Zach's all, well, if McFarland doesn't do anything by March 7th, I'm gonna tear his head off. Is there a little worry here that, say they do win 4 in a row to start this homestand, that they get a little too patient, March 7th comes and goes, and then come playoff time, we're like, you needed to make another move or two?
Well, yesterday at this time, I would have told you had to be aggressive at the trade deadline, because the podcast that I did here on Tuesday, I laid out all the key guys that have just been struggling. Middlestat, O'Connor, both scored last night, by the way. Ross Colton, Miles Wood, Jonathan Drouin. All these guys have been just scuffling the last, 13, 15 games or so. So yesterday at this point, I would have said, you have to be aggressive at the trade deadline. You have to be working some wonders at the trade deadline. But it's just one game. But I think we're in agreement that one game last night was so impressive, it does have to make you think a little bit, right? And maybe pause those thoughts. But the only problem is you only got 3 more games for a sample size to decide what you want to do. So as I sit here right now, I would say still be open to being aggressive. That was just one game, as impressive as it was. Still look to be aggressive at the trade deadline. I don't know. Will you string together 3 more of these? Well, then maybe we'll have to revisit.
And is Nichushkin, in a sense, your big trade deadline acquisition since he missed 2 months? But as we outlined earlier in the show, that is a scary proposition for Avs fans. All right, it was good to be back. It was fun. Appreciate
nice tan.
You. Thank you. Am I tan?
A little bit.
Maybe a little.
It doesn't take much for you to look tanned.
I usually try to just avoid getting bright red.
Pasty.
That's my goal. But this homestand should be a lot of fun. Tell us a lot about the Avs. And of course, Mike and I will be back next Tuesday and Thursday as the trade deadline in the NHL gets closer and closer.